Tian Wigmore is the co-owner and operator of Legacy Realty, where his team sees a couple thousand houses a year. And for each of those houses, they look at 3 to 6 comparable homes that have recently sold. This means his office is looking in depth on the pricing of thousands of houses on PEI. You would be hard pressed to find a single person who is more researched on home prices on PEI than Tian. In this conversation, we dive into recent changes in home prices, where to invest money in your house to get the best return, and we also dive into his journey starting out in music, just like me. If you want to learn more about what is happening in the PEI real estate market, this is the show for you. We are now releasing one episode per week on Tuesday mornings, so you can wake up and listen with breakfast, your morning workout, or on your way to work. Subscribe to Chattel Fixtures on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and please comment and leave a review if you like the show. Want to talk with me? Find my contact info, show notes, and more at chattelfixtures.com. That's CHATTEL fixtures.com. Let's get started. All right, here we go.
Sounds good.
So today we have Tian Wigmore, who is the co-owner and operator at Legacy Realty. He specializes in residential and commercial valuation and often works on expropriation, easement, and I'm going to ask him to explain that for anyone who doesn't know, litigation and asset management cases for many private and public sector clients. To date, Tian has completed over 6,000 appraisals. Tian and the team at Legacy Realty are running a serious operation focused on appraisal, but also buying and selling properties and working both here on PEI and in the greater Toronto Hamilton area of Ontario. Tian Wigmore, along with Beth Wigmore, have founded a new startup called Lena, which is being developed to streamline appraisal operations. The focus of Lena is reducing the amount of time it takes to complete the full end-to-end appraisal process and reduce error rates and redundancy. Tian is also a well-known musician on PEI, and we both came out of the music industry. My guess is there'd be probably some people on PEI that don't even realize Tian works in the real estate industry. I'm sure there's, probably plenty we could talk about there. I'm super excited to have Tian with us today. To talk about what homeowners can do. I kind of want to talk with you about what homeowners can do to increase the appraised value of their properties and talk about all these different projects you have going on. So welcome, Tian.
Thanks for having me. This is great. Great honor.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you here. It was funny, like I'm going to set this down here kind of awkwardly.
No problem.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, it was funny. Like I remember hearing you were in real estate, and I didn't even know. And then I started asking around, and I'm like, this is a pretty advanced operation you got going on here. Like from like guitar player, playing with Tim, Jason, and all these other projects and stuff, to running this like sophisticated appraisal business with staff and all this stuff going on. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the journey? I mean, you're still making music, but from there to what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird connect the dots. So when I was in high school, actually, a friend of mine who was the manager of the credit union in Kensington, where I moved to when I moved from Manitoba, her name's Tracy, and she was like, so I know you're graduating soon. I know you're going into business. She's like, have you ever heard of an AACI? And I said, no. She's like, well, if I could go back and do it all again, I would get my AACI. You should really take a look into this. I had originally thought I would maybe go to school for music, but I didn't see a lot of sort of job potential out of it. Now I know that there is, but being in grade 12, you don't always know all the options that are available. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe going into business, doing law would be good. I just thought getting my business degree was great. Had that same conversation with Tracy, and she's like, take a look at the AACI. It's a lot of school, but there's not a lot of them out there. And as a bank manager, we use them all the time. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of stuck with me. So fast forward, I get my business degree. I was touring a lot during my university tenure, missing a lot of classes. I had some really patient and very easygoing teachers that allowed me to sort of makeup tests when I was back home from the road, that type of thing.
Did you go straight into university out of high school?
I did, yeah. Yeah. So then when I got out of university and got my degree, music was busy. I was playing with a bunch of different bands. I was touring with Tim. I was playing with In-Flight Safety. I was, doing some tours with the Trues, these different things. So my intent was to get my AACI right out of school, right out of university. But I really wanted to ride the music thing for a bit. I was having fun. I was traveling, getting, paid modestly to do so. So I, just kind of rode that wave. But the whole time I had, set myself up so that when I was ready, I could get my AACI or whatever it may be. So fast forward, I meet my wife now, Beth. We're together. Music is great, but I'm starting to really sort of crave that stability, craving doing something on my own. So we got married, and at that time I was starting to do my courses through UBC to get my AACI. And one thing about any aspiring appraisers out there that may be listening, it's very hard. One of the components of getting your AACI or your CRA, your Certified Residential Appraiser certificate, is that you need a mentor. So on PEI, there aren't many appraisers. And when I was coming up, I knocked on everybody's door and nobody was in a position to take me on. Therefore, my aspirations to become an AACI were sort of dead in the water. So we made the tough decision to pack up and move to Hamilton.
Right.
I just started putting out resumes online to any appraisal firm that I could find in Ontario. My wife Beth is from there. And basically I got this response and this interview from a lady named Agnes. She worked at like a boutique appraisal firm in downtown Toronto. We had an interview. She knew I had no experience. She knew that I had no real work history resume. I had worked in events and stuff like that, but nothing real estate related.
Yeah.
She just knew that I was really eager to get my AACI. She knew I had a business degree, and she took a chance and became my mentor. So Beth and I moved to Hamilton. We packed up our Hyundai Accent with everything.
What year was this?
Owned. This would be 7 or 8 years ago now.
Okay, yeah.
Packed up our Hyundai Accent. I was just squished up to the window with all of our stuff and drove to Hamilton and basically started kind of a whole new journey there.
Oh, man.
So it was...
That felt kind of refreshing in a way.
It was refreshing.
Was it scary?
Really scary. Like, I hadn't really... This was a huge defining moment, definitely in my life. I had actually just put out my own EP. I was really nervous about sort of working for a company on a commission structure when I didn't really know anything about the industry. I was really nervous. I was really sad to be leaving music because it's all I really knew for many, many years.
And did you not play for a while when you got up there?
No, it was full time. Like, I was in school, I was working, doing crazy amounts of appraisals a day.
Yeah.
And when I got there, I had won an ECMA for my EP.
That's amazing.
And I didn't even know. I was getting all these texts being like, "Oh my God, you just won an ECMA." And I was like,
out there.
"Oh, I'm in a hazmat suit actually appraising this horrible, house with a bunch of mold and asbestos in it." So just kind of a total, you think about walking across the stage on the ECMAs, winning your first ECMA, to this sort of, you're into this 9 to 5 sort of business world. But I just had this funny feeling that it was the right move for me. And like I say, that was a huge leap of faith. When you mentor, you get paid nothing. When you're in mentorship, you really get paid nothing. You're sort of working for the experience, and you're doing school at UBC on top of that.
Oh man. Wow. So you said a crazy amount of appraisals a day. Like, what was the most appraisals you would have ever done in a day?
So I worked for a company called Acuity, and I think I had done 22 site visits in one day before.
Seriously?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Like, I was
Holy smokes. There must have been like this system that was just, you'd be
Yes.
running around with the measuring tape. Like, I'm just
It's
trying to
crazy.
picture what would be happening there.
It was crazy. So I really lucked out. This lady, Agnes, who took a chance. She is very forward thinking. She has her MBA. I think now she's becoming an architect.
Oh, really?
She had her AACI at this time. Like, she's very forward thinking.
She just likes to keep advancing things.
Keeps advancing. Even when we were doing all these crazy appraisals, she had a rocking business. She was like taking courses on architecture for like weeks at a time on top of all her workload. So one cool thing about her, thinking about moving forward and pushing the boundaries, she didn't do appraisals like anybody else. If you look at the stats for appraisers across Canada, in North America, 55% of them are over the age of 55.
Right.
There's not a lot of women in the field, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Given the fact that there is this mentorship component, a lot of young appraisers learn from these older men.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just passing down the way that they've always done it, which is pen and paper. You mentioned measuring tape or the classic wheel. They're not utilizing technology. Well, Agnes blew that up completely. So she was using kind of a Frankenstein model where she had Google Maps, Dropbox, digital filing. We had tablets where we were sending inspection reports digitally over like Wi-Fi or cell signal to sort of a command central where she had a report writer helping us like do sort of the mundane input tasks. So my job when I got there, at first I just had to learn how to write an appraisal report and get it 100% right.
Okay.
Once I got past that and I sort of graduated into being able to do more volume, it became more about, okay, so appraisal reports are, say, 75% brain work and 25% brain work, 75% data input.
Right.
You're basically taking the data that you collect on site and putting it into this form, and then you're creating this opinion of value based on comparable sales. That's what you go to school to do. You don't go to school to transfer notes as an appraiser. So she kind of took that and ran with it with this new system. So we were able to do massive volume, and in turn, she was able to make a ton of money.
Oh, I can only imagine.
So we had 24-hour turnaround times with all the banks.
Okay, great.
And we were doing just massive amounts of appraisals.
Yeah, and I can just imagine all the banks being like, okay, you can definitely get this to me in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Bam, let's do this. Because so many times there's so many processes when you're, say, making a purchase or when you're refinancing that can snag up.
Yes.
And slow things down. So anytime you can reliably get something done in a short period of time is like a major value add.
Yeah. So I think and
better for business too. I mean, you could put more through.
It's great. You can put more through, or you can work. The other thing that I see a lot is you can work more efficiently and have more time with your family, or you can do maybe a side hustle, or maybe, play music, rekindle an old passion or whatever. But there's definitely those two streams that learning sort of how Agnes did things sort of opened my eyes to a whole new world of possibilities. And for those that don't know the appraisal industry, your work volume that you get. So I don't know if this is boring for people, but there's basically a bank and an appraiser. And then in the middle, there's what's called an AMC, an appraisal management company. And they basically act as a middleman between banks and appraisers. So there's no corroboration between them. I guess back in the day, early 2000s, there was a lot of, people saying, "Hey, I'll give you an extra $100. Just give me this value." Or, knew all the bankers. There was sort of a friendship thing. So AMCs came into place to sort of take that away. Well, AMCs divvy out work based on your turnaround times.
Right.
How little they have to communicate with you, like for mistakes, and price is a factor as well.
Right.
But, by implementing these sort of systems, Agnes was able to really get crazy volume and
Yeah.
do amazing amounts
'Cause
of work.
if you're more accurate,
Hmm.
faster,
Yeah.
um, and because you're faster, you could probably afford even if those two are better and you're the same price,
Yeah.
then instantly you win. But you probably could even afford to have your price slightly lower because you're faster
You could. Some
if you
people
wanted,
go the opposite way too.
right?
If you know that you can go with an appraisal firm, you're going to get your appraisal, and there's not going to be any back and forth. It's just going to be great, well done. Third party opinion of value. You can actually charge a bit more.
Of course, it
So
only makes
it's
sense.
yeah. Once you establish that reputation, that's
Yeah.
key. So that was really sort of moving to Hamilton, doing that first, couple years of work and really grinding it out. And I was working there in like early, like before 2017, where they had the fair housing market announcement. So I worked there in a market that was very similar to what we've just seen here, where prices were going crazy, um, out of control, things going for hundreds of thousands over asking. Um, so we were getting tons of volume, seeing crazy houses, just getting all this experience, right?
Mm.
I was also doing a lot of commercial work with Agnes as well. So that it was amazing.
Step back. Do you say 2017? Can you explain that fair housing thing?
Sure. So we were seeing this insane market in all of Ontario, basically, where houses were getting inflated in value, similar to what we've seen sort of in PEI here, just on a bigger scale, because everything's times 10 there.
Right.
So there was a lot of pressure on the Liberal government in the province to do something about it. Kathleen Wynne, who was the premier at the time, initiated what was called the Fair Housing Act, and it was basically predicated on the assumption that a lot of the inflated prices were coming from foreign buyers, and they were basically buying and holding vacant real estate, and letting it appreciate.
Like just like speculative
Yeah,
investment.
they were calling them ghost houses. So you would go in, and it was true in some regard. You would go into certain condo buildings that were brand new. Nobody would live in them. There's no tenants. It was people that were holding for 6 months, capitalizing on the appreciation and selling. So because there was so much haste and so much pressure to do something, they announced this fair housing plan, which basically eliminated a lot of speculative foreign buying. That really scared people. So people basically were like, oh, the housing market's going to cool right off. Nobody bought anything after that. So I was appraising houses in the GTA 1 month. That would, just for example's sake, $1.5 million house. I would go back 2 months later and they would have lost like $300,000 in value.
Right. And that's from the appraised value based on the comps that are selling right now.
Exactly. So people basically were just kind of what we're seeing here. But like I say, on a larger scale, people just stopped buying. It basically burst that inflated housing bubble, and it just brought prices right back to probably where they should have been.
So have you seen, just leaping forward to now, and we could come back to that, chronological view if we want, but have you seen a lot of pricing adjustment in your appraisals right now in PEI over the last, say, 6 months?
Yeah. So it's funny because, well, as a real estate agent, you'll deal with this as well. As an appraiser, we're always dealing in historical data.
Of course, yeah. There's a lag time.
There's a lag time. So one massive thing that we need to do as appraisers, and we pride ourselves on doing at Legacy, is a lot of paired sales analysis with current projects. We have the opportunity to see, a couple thousand houses a year, and for each of those houses, we have to pull 3, 4, 5, 6 comps each. So we see a massive amount of properties.
You're just searching comps
it's
like
all the time. So you start seeing these interesting patterns arising. And if you were to look at September's, MLS stats from the PEI Real Estate Association, you'd see that prices actually were increasing. but
year over year.
year over year. So
But I feel like there was maybe a peak in it.
yes, I think there's
like
a lot of historical data that is getting thrown in there. Sales are closing, right?
Yeah.
So something that could have been bought in July is closing in September or even earlier.
But also the market in, say, September 2021 was different from, say, the market in February 2022.
Exactly.
So there could have been, say, a decline from
of course,
last winter, and that still show up as a price increase on a year-over-year basis.
for sure. So amazing that you have that sort of mindset around it, because I speak to lots of people that are like, oh, well, look at these, especially when I'm doing appraisals, I'm getting argued against, which happens all the time.
I mean, depending on where you are in the equation, you hope it goes a certain way.
Exactly. And that's totally fair. I mean, I'm exactly the same. I own proproperties as well.
Yeah.
And when I get an appraisal, I want it to come out to a certain number.
Yeah. And you
It's
want
just
it to
human
match.
nature.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But a lot of times people throw stats at you and they don't realize that our job as appraisers is to sort of derive our own primary data that we see in the market. So one really crazy thing that has happened recently for us is because of Fiona, a lot of appraisals that we have done a couple months ago, we've actually had to go out and reappraise and see if there's any Fiona damage. In the meantime, we're also reappraising the house. And I've seen a lot of houses that I appraised 3 months ago dropping in value.
Right.
And very eerily similar to what I was seeing in Toronto. Now I'm not seeing $300,000 in the difference. I'm talking like 20, 30,000 over, 4 months or something like that. But we've started really compiling our own stats. And I'm definitely seeing a decrease.
A decrease,
big time.
Well, I mean, from that report from the Real Estate Association, it did say that there was a larger discrepancy between the listings and the actual sales.
Yeah, big time.
So there's people going on them. I think there are people kind of, my gut feeling is there's people going on the market saying, let's get this sold before things get worse.
Yeah.
So there's all these people doing this at once.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, people are kind of like, let's just wait a minute and see what happens before buying. So I suspect there's probably a lot of buyers out there that are kind of raring to go, but just kind of holding themselves back until they get a better sense of where things are going.
100%. Like, 6 months ago even, it's happening so fast just with the interest rates going up. Demand was crazy. There was not enough supply. That didn't change. It's just demand is still there in a sense, but
it's latent.
It's latent, and it's sort of a dormant demand until things come down, which
and people get a sense of where. Yeah. It's
people are optimistic too. Real estate is cyclical always. So interest rates are going to go up. It sounds like we're going to get close to or have a recession. And at that point, they're going to have to start dropping interest rates because people won't be able to afford to live.
Yeah.
So it will come back. And that's when I think you'll see another big boom. Because on a macro level, PEI and Charlottetown are insanely competitive in a lot of ways, from an investment standpoint and from just a livability standpoint. If you're not interested in investing in real estate, this is such a great place to live. We're always talking about how crazy the housing prices are here, but it's nothing compared to the rest of Canada. We've really
the big urban centers anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The places that have similar amenities like PEI, we've got everything we need here. You can go to rural Saskatchewan and get a house for a lot cheaper, but nobody wants to live there. I used to live in that area. So, PEI and Charlottetown in particular are quite a bit better. So where do you you must have instincts about where things are going, say, and okay, here's an interesting question, maybe. Okay.
Say a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever increments make sense to you.
Yeah.
Do you have a guess in your mind of what's going to happen? I mean, it's hard to tell.
I have a guess. I think the Bank of Canada, they just increased rates again. I think they're going to continue doing that for a bit. Okay. And I think we're going to see some pretty tough lean times as far as, we're talking about real estate. So I think as far as the real estate market, I think that latent demand is going to stay.
Mhm.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of, people wanting to purchase unless it's out of extreme necessity. Once that cools off and we're sort of on tough times and the Bank of Canada starts reducing rates, I do think there's a pent up demand. There's still a shortage. Our immigration is outpacing our housing starts by a crazy amount.
Right.
Which is also sad because I think with the increased building is so expensive already.
Right.
I think
Exactly.
what we need here is sort of a higher density residential component to our housing mix, and that is so expensive to build. You pretty much always have to finance that stuff.
And people have been burned. Like if you go back a little ways, like I don't remember the actual year, something like 2015, 2016, where prior to that, there had been this big kind of housing boom, but then supply outpaced demand.
Yes.
And people forget that this was only, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And so vacancy rates hit something like 8% on PEI.
Yes.
And at 8%, this isn't 8% across the board, right? There'd be some types of, say, there'd be some types of places for rent that just wouldn't be able to find renters at all.
Yeah.
And so you could be sitting on that, or you have, say, a new construction project that just finished and you're not able to get it filled.
Yeah.
And so then what happened was, at least this is my impression from talking from a presentation I saw by CMHC, and it's possible I'll get some of the details wrong. But my kind of loose understanding of it is that scared developers.
Yeah.
Right. And so developers really slowed down. But meanwhile, immigration, bam, we had new like tours of accommodations coming in that also sort of was having a demand on supply. We had also, it seemed like, not that much later, you just put through a few more years later and people are able to start working more remotely. They're thinking, okay, I can move to PEI and work my higher salary Toronto job in lower cost environments. You have this kind of arbitrage happening. So all this happening at once. So right after that, we actually really needed the housing very soon
Big
after
time.
that. But there's a lag between when you even decide you're gonna build something,
Yeah.
and you have to find the land, and you have to put in all the infrastructure. Then you have, permits. This can be
the red tape's
several years before you have it developed. And then now people are scared about buying. And even if there is this demand, you can imagine that having a depressing effect on developers who are going to risk their shirt, on some big project,
Big time.
put it all on the line and hope that it works. Meanwhile, we need that. We're still, I don't know what vacancy rates are on PEI, but I suspect they're still very
they're
low.
very low still. Yeah. Like around the 2%. They've increased a bit, but not really.
Okay. But no longer in the 0%.
No. The zero, that was crazy.
That was crazy. That was actually
pretty nuts.
Pretty
and
nuts.
unacceptable, really, at
Yeah.
the end of the day. Like, I have different opinions on that. There's another, it was funny because I was at a short-term rental meeting and the Charlottetown city planner did a presentation. And there was a point in time during that period that you were just discussing where no buildings were actually allowed to be built because I don't think Charlottetown had the water infrastructure in place. So if I remember correctly, like I may have the details wrong, but there was like 2 or 3 years where nothing could be built because they didn't have the infrastructure in place. So that is a huge thing that we never hear anything about.
Right. Oh, there's just so many dynamics at play here too. It's like
crazy.
Like I feel like there is like when you look at say the way that, okay, the economy is getting all heated up and inflation's going crazy, right? And prices are just too high. So much of that, I'm sort of switching topics, but kind of using it as a metaphor, but it's really directly applies to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So much of that was supply constraints from all the turmoil over the last couple of years, whether that be a war or whether that be other issues, the big guy there, it's like all that stuff really constrain the movement of products around the world.
For sure.
And then if someone needs it, but it's too far away, but the only people that have it here they're able to charge more.
Yeah.
Because people fight over, basically compete over being able to get access to that thing. So the price of that thing goes up. Supply goes down, price goes up. That was a huge impact of what was happening with a lot of inflation. But meanwhile, on top of that, governments were spending a lot just to make sure that everybody could get by, get through all these tough times.
Totally.
So you're competing over fewer things with more money. And that was kind of what was creating the inflation. But it's really interesting the way that central banks try to take a role in curbing inflation. The side that they can tamp down is the demand side by reducing the supply of money.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, we can't really affect how many goods are here, but we can affect how much money people have to buy those goods by increasing interest rates and changing their monetary policy, because they are also buying assets, which, puts all this puts all this capital into it. So they're pulling it back. But it's interesting, right as supply of a lot of resources in the world, the supply chain's opening back up.
Yes.
The chip problem that we were having, apparently that's alleviated. There's no longer all these boats waiting in California off the coast, not able to get to port. There is the lockdowns are a lot less in China right now. There's still some, I believe, but like when Shanghai was locked down, for example, there's no longer a boat blocking the Panama Canal.
Yeah,
Remember
exactly.
that?
Yeah.
Like that was like just one of those crazy little moments in all of this. But supply is coming back online, and demand is being pressured down by these increase of interest rates. And this is fast. These interest rates are have gone up super fast.
Big time.
And as you say, even from an appraisal perspective, when you're doing a comparative analysis and saying, okay, we're comparing the price to get an accurate appraisal of this, well, you may be looking at something from a couple months ago. That might be the most recent comp that you can come up with.
Yeah.
And that can actually be inflated compared to what the market actually is saying right now.
It is.
And that is the sort of information that these decision makers are looking at, because you can only look at what's happened. The future is not visible. You can make guesses of what's going to happen in the future. You have to base it on the past, right? So you see this big influx of new stuff coming down and this big decrease. I mean, that feels like the recipe for a collapse in demand relative to supply.
Yes.
So I think that's what a lot of people are assessing in terms of where this is going. But then if you look at, specific to the real estate market with the supply demand piece, a big factor in the real estate market is slow supply and demand adjustments. So we have, when government is making policy decisions around supply, say for, and I almost hate to get into this topic because I feel like it's sort of a touchy one, but say short-term rentals, they're making permanent decisions on a variable topic.
Yeah.
Right. So it's there's a lot of ways, I feel we could be more nimble with a lot of these things, and by kind of really just looking at it with a lot of empathy and but also just a keen understanding of what's really happening. And that's where oftentimes these topics, I think in a way it's good that they get politicized, because I think if not for all these people fighting for affordable housing, who are actually doing it, who are actually out there putting pressure on government to do something about it, change doesn't necessarily happen. And then and then you can be in a far worse situation where it's just we don't want to live short-term rentals, it's not just the supply side that is an issue with that. There's a community side, there's I don't want Charlottetown to become this place that is just I love Cavendish, but it's not really a residential community where you have neighbors and that kind of thing. Wouldn't it be a little sad if Charlottetown, turned into only transient, So
Yeah.
there's just all these different forces at play. And I feel like if we can just take an honest look with empathy, but also understanding and sophistication in how we deal with a lot of these things, I definitely don't want to put myself out as a person who has to make these decisions. Because
No.
a lot of pressure. But yeah, there's all these different factors involved with all this stuff. And it's, and if only you could have this situation where, because people are so biased, I don't own a lot of real estate right now, but when I did, it was like, not gonna lie, it's kind of nice when there's more pressure for purchase. That value is higher if I want to reappraise it and get more capital back out of it to be able to invest in something else. That option is available. There's a lot of good things if you're an owner, if the value of your property goes up, right?
Yeah.
Like that is obviously what you want. Meanwhile, if you are working a job where the salary is, say, nearer the minimum wage end of things, or even not, even if you're just making like a moderate income. There was a while like I was looking at, because I was in a position where I wasn't sure if I was going to have to enter the rental market or not.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous that I was going to have to.
Yeah.
I was looking at the prices and I was like, man, this would suck me dry.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm not suggesting that I have all the solutions for it or anything, but the point I'm making is, wouldn't it be nice if you just had like these, like just super smart people who really listened and understood the people on all sides of this, and not to say that we don't have that. I know they're out there. Like there's brilliant people working on trying to work on this stuff, but that's what I hope for.
Yeah, it would be amazing. We're very reactive. On PEI, I notice it even more so than other places. We're very reactive to everything. We have such an advantage on Prince Edward Island because we are a little bit insulated from the rest. Like, we're seeing housing prices go up over the last, say, 3 years. Well, the rest of Canada has been seeing it go over since I started appraising.
Right.
So we know that immigration's going up. Like this goes, for almost everything. You can really look to the rest of Canada to see the trends that are going. And part of what we need to be doing is, yes, you have to work on historical data, but it's also just as important to sort of take what's happening in other areas that have, correlation with our province and project out, okay, 5-year plan. Like, what is going to happen here? It's hard for me because I was in Ontario, it's hard for me to look over here and say, people didn't know that, the housing prices were so insanely high in Ontario that people were going to start moving to the East Coast.
Right.
Like, it kind of just seems sort of commonsensical. I know it's deeper than that, but even in business, like, I remember in my touring days going to a place like Toronto or Vancouver and going to like a really amazing coffee shop where they roast their own beans. They're doing all this stuff, coming back to PEI and being like, we should have that here.
Yeah.
And
totally.
then I remember like Receiver opening up and being like, these guys are so smart. They see that it's working in other places and they're applying it to here. And, we've got this there's great coffee roasters here now, but that's just a funny example of, I remember going on tour and being like, oh, one of the best things, you get an amazing cup of like coffee. It's not Robbins, although I brought a Robbins here today. Okay. I love it. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it goes the same with real estate and planning. I just find the planning, I worked in the public sector when I was in Ontario for a while, and there needs to be more planning on this. Like the fact that we didn't have the infrastructure to put through, higher density builds. That's insane. That should never happen. And it should be out there that was a thing. It should be, the fact that short-term rentals I don't own any, but they're only one small piece of a huge problem. It's a supply and demand problem. And the biggest issue is our immigration here is outpacing our builds. So until we sort of solve that issue, which you can do by cutting red tape in the approval process. You can give government incentives by cutting, cash into the parkland. There's so many things that a government can do to entice builders to come here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not in the public sector here,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm hoping that all those things are being looked at.
Yeah, my gut feeling is they are, and I think it's always really hard because you've got that kind of like, there's this. You need to kind of surf a wave with these things if you're someone who's working on this policy, or say if you're a politician who needs to be elected back in,
For sure.
and who needs the public support in order to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you say have this residential neighborhood, it's all single family all over the place, and someone's like, I'm gonna erect a big giant tower here, it just changes things so dramatically.
But that's not what it should be. Proper planning would eliminate that. You find other areas maybe on the outskirts. Like I look at, there's lots of positive stuff happening. Like I look at East Royalty and the multi-unit res that's happening out there being built. That's great. There wasn't a lot of single family houses. Now I know further down, kind of by the Petro there, the Bells. I know that's a bit more of a residential area, so I'm sure they're feeling a bit of pressure. But if you have proper urban planning and you project out year over year, like we believe that the immigration policy is still going to be strong. We know that people are going to be coming here for years and years, even after the interest rates go down. We need to make sure that there's rental units available. And another thing that I notice is getting creative with the types of housing that we're building. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a stacked townhouse on PEI,
right?
Which they're super cost effective to build. They're lower square footage, great for, a person and a roommate, great for students. And they're pretty high density too. You could have 3 stacked townhouses in one envelope. I don't see any of that stuff happening. Other things like common element condominiums. There's so many different unit types that I think we could add to our mix that I think could really help this housing problem and the rental problem. It's insane we have obviously offices in Ontario. You're looking at, $700,000-$800,000 houses in Ontario getting the same kind of rents for a $400,000 house here or less.
Right.
It's crazy. Something has to be done. I think, there's no perfect solution, but it's really those types of things, creative thinking. And like I say, looking to other municipalities, other jurisdictions. That's really the key to do it.
Right.
You don't have to be working in the past. We don't need to be working in the past, because if you're looking at just on the micro level on PEI, well, we haven't dealt with anything like this before. Why don't we look,
where they have?
Look where they have. Look to Europe. Like, they're super advanced. Look, to some places in the States. Look to other places in Canada. We don't need to be working in the past. We should be working to find creative solutions.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ideas out there too. Like, I'm all for the private sector going hard on it, because I think there's just so much motive. But I think for people out there who are like, okay, I've got a good functioning brain, maybe a little bit of experience in real estate, maybe understand a little bit of finance or basic level, you can work with some friends and do work on figuring out co-ops too. Like,
big time.
You need for a co-op, because it is kind of that shared ownership structure. It's a really beautiful thing for the participants. Kind of harder to get that initiative because it doesn't have necessarily that big money score for the people involved in doing it.
Yeah.
But if you got some energy and you don't mind putting in a little bit of time and you want to make a difference, I really think that's something people can get involved with and helping make co-ops. There's a lot of stories of other parts of the world where that has been extremely successful. The structure of it is I don't fully understand, but one thing I do know is that for anybody who is sort of catching this, maybe I could be involved in kind of making a positive contribution to this by working specifically on co-ops. And you could work in the private sector to do it. You could work in construction to do it. You could be a productive member of society just out there working and earning to do it. But if you want to go the co-op route, there's more incentives. There's I am not fully up to speed on this, but I was following it a few years ago really closely, and there are much bigger subsidies available for making co-op units than for purely private sector
For
ones.
sure. Why aren't we marketing those types of things?
Mm.
It should be, the problem with, the crazy rents here and the lack of supply, it's not going to be solved by government or the private sector alone. We have to be working together.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, from a planning perspective, yeah, if you're a young kind of group that's really invested in an idea like that,
Mm-hmm.
go talk to, your local, go talk to the premier, go talk to whoever's in the
That's a
municipality.
great thing about PEI.
And I think they just want to hear these kind of cool ideas. I think they want to hear people getting engaged, and, change can happen. That's the thing. We're so lucky on PEI. It's such a small place. You can enact change here. And if we all work together, it can happen quickly because there's not, it's not so cumbersome as other places.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So I don't know. I think there's so many positive things about being here and the opportunities that are presented. I just hope, I hope that we can get the rent, the rent stuff figured out. I feel so bad for people.
And it just doesn't make sense. And I mean, obviously, like, there's like a supply demand thing from the wage perspective too. And if it costs more to live here, then people can't afford to live here.
Mm-hmm.
If and take that job at a lower wage. So you can, wages can be a factor. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into all this. But,
Big time.
And I mean, it is like this variable thing when you think of like inflation and the value of the dollar. Like all these things can change, and like incomes can change, and you can figure out ways to earn more, or you can figure out, like, there's a lot of, it's dynamic. It's really interesting world. Oh my God.
Yeah.
When you're doing appraisals, do you do some commercial stuff where you're looking at the kind of appraising, not based on comps, based on like rental income and all that stuff?
Always. Yeah.
Yeah.
So especially in commercial appraisal, when you're dealing with anything that has pretty much anything, actually, when you're doing commercial appraisal, that would be like your go-to, like a direct comparison approach and an income approach based on the rents that you can derive out of the property, with a cap rate.
And do you work with a cap rate? Okay. Yep. And so a capitalization rate, trying to think of how to best explain that to not. Actually, how about you explain what a cap rate is?
Just it's basically it's a quantifiable, it's a numerical reflection of risk, basically.
Oh,
so
that's a good way of looking at it.
If you're using like just a standard cap rate, you basically, if the number is low, then that means, if you're looking at cap rates for different investments, if the number is low, it means there's low risk involved. And if it's a higher number, usually a percentage, that means it's higher risk, you need more reward.
Right.
So the cap rates here have been relatively good because the rental market, there's no vacancy and the rents are crazy. So the cap rates here are really, really great and very attractive. So
when you're doing, this is probably a big, for new construction, which is kind of really important to what ended up being this big part of this conversation. Getting the appropriate appraisal to say, get to the next phase of construction, that hasn't really been a barrier too much.
No. So how it typically works with new construction is I assume you're talking about commercial. Say
commercial, let's say multifamily,
sure,
residential.
So that you would always do, this is if a bank's involved.
Yeah, assuming a bank's involved, yeah.
Most people need to finance these things, or especially in the past, like money was so cheap not that long ago that you wanted to finance, you want to leverage the bank. Yeah. So we would do, you would own a piece of land, we would appraise the property as if it was built. What's the value of it today as if it were built? We do that by obviously working with the contractors, figuring out all the finishes, figuring out, how big it's going to be, all that kind of stuff.
That's got to be a big job.
It is. It can be really big, depending on the project and depending on the amount of detail that the bank wants.
And you'd be hired by the bank, similar to in residential.
Yeah, or I get hired by private companies just to say like, hey, I've got 2 construction projects here. What are they going to be worth if I build them? What can I get for rents? And they'll make a lot of their business decisions based on that, because it's better to pay me X amount of dollars and figure out building this is the wrong move, as it is to build it and spend a couple $1 million and realize, oh man, this doesn't work.
Oh yeah.
So we do a lot of that.
That would be super handy.
Yeah. So we do a lot of like consulting, which a lot of people don't think of appraisers in that context. I think the generic view of an appraiser is, oh, I got to refinance my house, so the bank's going to send an appraiser out. That is a lot of what appraisers can do. And at Legacy, like we do a ton of that, a couple thousand, residential appraisals a year. But we do a lot more than that. We do a lot of consulting with businesses, developers, doing projected like prices of what a subdivision will be worth if it's all subdivided. Is it worth putting the inputs in to actually do it?
Yeah.
We do a lot of, estate work. We do a lot of asset valuation. There's so much more that an appraiser does. Back on the construction thing, we do a lot of new construction projects. Once you get a value as if complete, you go back a couple times and do progress draws, where the bank will give you X amount of dollars for the percentage complete.
Right.
So that's a really good revenue source for us, because we get that sort of repeat.
You have to go
business.
2 times. Yeah.
It's also really cool, money aside, really neat to see how the construction process works. Very fulfilling to go and see a finished product. Because you just see how hard they're working and how stressful it can be. So that's one of my favorite parts of appraising.
And you'd be coming in at this like critical point where they're like, we are halfway through building this big thing.
For sure.
You're investing, months and so many labor hours and so much materials.
Yeah.
And we need the bank.
Yeah.
We need the bank to finish this.
Yeah. It gets really
and it's like you're walking in there and they're watching you like,
it's a lot of pressure.
This person needs to think that what we did is worthy.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the ultimate test.
Yeah, we're lucky.
The construction company.
We're lucky because we have very strict guidelines on the bank. I'm very empathetic with, applicants for mortgages or construction loans. I'm so empathetic for anyone in that position, because it's so stressful. Like, we own a couple of properties as well, and we've gone through renovations and construction, and I've been on that other side, and I know how hard it can be. So a lot of times what I like to do is, if I know we have a progress inspection coming up, I want the builder to call me a couple months before and say, hey, I want to get this to 66% complete. What's the quickest and best way I can do it? And I can walk through them. I'll take an hour, I'll take 2 hours to just walk through exactly what we're going to be looking for, what finishes score higher on the bank's progress report. I love doing that kind of stuff, that consultation before. I look at appraisal as it's very much a service. And even though I'm hired by banks or companies or law offices, I want to make sure that everybody has a good experience. Everybody's educated on what they can do, because there's lots of ways that you can achieve your goals. Like, here's a funny example. Well, it wasn't funny. It was horrible. We had a progress inspection that a bank ordered. The guy needed to get a certain amount complete before they would lock in his interest rate.
Okay.
We went in. We hadn't done the original appraisal. We were just doing this progress inspection. His garage was totally not finished, above grade garage. His basement was completely finished, but it wasn't in the build plans. So if he had called me a month before, I would say, do not touch your basement until your garage is done. You're not going to get, your 97% complete. Anyways, he was furious, and I totally understand why. He should have been like, not educated, but worked with in order to that's an easy fix that could have happened. He could have locked in his mortgage.
Just change the order of operations.
Exactly. And a lot of times getting to that percentage complete that's all you need to do. Change the order of operation. So there's like a real service, I'm sure, in real estate as an agent too. You're always walking through different scenarios. You're making sure your client feels comfortable. as appraisers, I really want to make sure that there's that customer service component as well. I think in the past, a lot of people have been like, a lot of appraisers have just walked in, this is my appraisal value, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't have that much ego.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the investors that you're working with have 50 years of experience or 40 years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
You got to listen to them, and you can't be afraid to take a second look at things and be learning all the time and have that customer service component. If you go back and you take, a solid look and, your value is not working and you feel really good about it, that's just the way it is. But at least people will feel better that you've really given it a shot and worked with them, right?
Yeah.
So
okay, a few rapid fire questions.
Sure.
One, okay, person has a house. They've got, say, they purchase this house and they're wanting to increase the value, say, to refinance or whatever, and notwithstanding kind of market dynamics right now, because sometimes the market is just the big effect. Mm-hmm. Like that's a big thing. But if someone has X amount of dollars, like what are the most important things they can do if they want to increase the appraised value of, or like a single family, for example?
Sure. So
residential.
I think the important thing is to learn. So as an appraiser, when I'm working, say on behalf of the bank, I'll assume we're talking about residential properties, mm-hmm. and there's a financing being done through the bank.
Yeah. And say it's for a refinance.
Okay.
And they want to invest so that they are able to refinance and get, say, their capital back.
Yeah. That's such an important thing in appraisal, like the context around it. So I would say my directive is to put a value on it that a prudent purchaser would pay within X amount of days. Usually it's 90, sometimes it can be 30. It depends on the bank. It depends mm-hmm. on the person that's applying. But in general, a person with like solid credit, I would say anything right now that's energy efficient related. So if you can throw a heat pump in the place, get say the $2,500 rebate, mm-hmm. that will add pretty good value to the house. Simple things like throwing coats of paint, making sure things are not half finished. The amount of houses you go into where the electrical panel is half torn apart, or there's like a construction project that's half done.
That just kills it for a purchaser.
Yeah. And you're not like, it's not probably what the prudent purchaser is going to want. Mm-hmm. So keep the money away from it and put it into something else. As far as like banks are concerned, square footage is king. So if you have a garage with a bit of ceiling height above it, finish it and put a heater in it. That's above grade GFA. You're getting like a price per square foot back in value, which is great. They value bathrooms a lot. They value bedrooms.
Number of bedrooms or square footage of
bedrooms? Just number of bedrooms. If you've got like our sort of general rule of thumb is that if it has a window and a closet, it's a bedroom, and that adds value.
Which you could effectively kind of make the place worse by doing that. Also,
you could, right? For
so
sure.
Say here, if I was like, you know what, we don't need this living room area.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll combine that area over there. That'll be a dining room / living room.
Yeah.
And we'll put a hallway to the stairs upstairs and turn this into a bedroom.
Yeah.
Now I feel like that would make this place in many ways worse to live, but it would add a bedroom. Would that effectively increase the price?
No. Not at all. So if I saw that, I would have red flags that it might be a rooming house, which a bank typically won't touch.
Right.
If you're trying to like cram bedroom, which I've seen bedrooms into half your kitchen, I've seen that. If you're trying to turn a living room or a dining room into a bedroom, it's not. So these
sort of like hack jobs is not the way to go.
And it's prudent purchaser. So if you go in, the space has to flow. That's why I say a coat of paint can go a long way. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, like when I'm talking about refinancing and I'm talking about market value through the lens of a bank, mm-hmm. at the end of the day, make sure your house is just livable and well done. Like you don't need to spend. The worst thing that you can do is, I went into a house once. It was in a subdivision. It was like a Mattamy home subdivision, and it was a cookie cutter home that the guy had put like, I can't remember the type of wood, but his trim was like $75,000.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, a prudent purchaser doesn't care about this.
That
You do.
$75,000 has maybe $3,000 of value
Exactly.
or something, or maybe
Or
more than
like,
that, but yeah.
you know, this putting in these crazy, like customized, you know, Brazilian rosewood cabinets, that type of stuff. You're not getting your value back. I just appraised a property in Toronto that had a diamond encrusted toilet. That's not really adding the value that, you know, it cost. It was a very expensive toilet. It's not going to increase the value.
Purchaser in the real market might just
Well,
love that.
that's where a real estate agent comes in.
Yeah.
My job is to, out of 100 people, what would 95% of them pay for this house within 90 days?
Yeah.
A real estate agent's job is to, I've got 100 clients. I've got to find the perfect one for this house.
Yeah. There's some some guy who works at De Beers who just loves diamonds.
Exactly.
It's the whole theme of his life. And has this diamond encrusted toilet. It's like, I don't care what this house costs. It's mine.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah.
That happens all the time. And that's where you get a lot of back and forth between appraisers and applicants or realtors.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of times, like we have, well, the prudent purchaser rule, basically.
Yeah.
We also have strict criteria from the banks. Like a lot of times the banks won't let you include certain facets of your property in an appraisal.
Okay.
A lot of times they won't allow us to take full acreage of a property.
Okay.
So every time I appraise something, I'm looking at it through the lens of the bank and a prudent purchaser, and I need to sort of run with those rules.
Mm-hmm.
As an agent, you're trying to find that one person who, like, you know, for this house, you know, grew up on this street, or, you know, their grandmother grew up down the road and they just love this area. They, you know, you're trying to find and connect with those things is more of an emotional connection you're trying to make. Whereas appraisers is kind of like,
this is what we're, but there is a little art to it though.
Very much like it's 50-50.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why economics is an art, right?
Yeah. It's not exact.
Appraisal, you're always trying to quantify human nature, which is impossible. So in appraisal, that is our whole job. You can't.
I mean, markets aren't like housing markets are neither standardized nor are they. Is there a standard to it?
No, there's a lot of qualitative stuff that go into
every piece of land's different.
Every piece of land's
different.
Absolutely, there's always external factors around properties that makes it different. You really. Like I always say that if you have like a strict math or a strict finance background, we do a lot of financial math in appraisal, tons of discounted cash flow, all that stuff. But if you have the kind of brain that you need a finite answer and you're going to go through the formulas, it's going to work, stay away from appraisal.
Right.
Because especially in a place like PEI, where there's not a ton of comparable sales, there's not a ton of data, there's not a ton of, quantifiable stuff. You need to really work on your qualifiable data as well. And as you get better at it, there's a lot of instinct involved as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always say that, you know, our toughest job and probably most important is quantifying human nature, which is impossible. So you just are doing the best you can.
Quantifying human nature.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I always tell anybody that I mentor, that's what I always tell people.
Quantifying human nature. Okay, cool. There's a lot to that.
There is. Yeah.
There's a lot to that.
Trying to stuff somebody's like, you know, psychology degree into a math equation. It's not possible.
Right.
So you're just doing the best that you can, and you're trying to, everything that you do as an appraiser has to be, it's always getting scrutinized and reviewed by underwriters, other appraisers, you know, staff appraisers. So every appraisal that I do, I go into it treating it like a little mini court case.
Right.
So I need to have the right data. It needs to be totally supportable. And if I can't support it, I can't put the number on it.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes you get sued as an appraiser all the time.
Right.
You need to be able to defend it, to defend your value.
So you need to make sure that you're doing a very reasonable job on everything, and like the decision is all decisions are made for a good reason.
For sure. There's even times where, like, sorry to interrupt. There's even times where I'll appraise a property and the evidence will point to X value through the lens of the bank and a prudent purchaser, and I will know that the right agent can get much more for it. But the evidence to back that up and the evidence in conjunction with the lens that I need to look through supports this value.
Right. Okay. That can be a tough pill to swallow from if you're trying to say get a certain value from it
For sure.
as a purchaser or as a refinance or whatever.
Big time.
Okay. Bit of change of gear. There's so much we could go down on all this, but
Sure.
I thought it'd be nice to touch on Lena for a second.
Sure.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. So if we rewind back to kind of the earlier portion of the conversation, I was mentioning my first sort of appraisal gig, and my first mentor, Agnes, she had this incredible sort of Frankenstein system that she had created in order to sort of maximize efficiency in appraisal. So over the years, I've been obsessed with trying to bring the antiquated appraisal profession into sort of, this technologically laden era that we're in. So what we have done is we've taken a lot of things that I learned in Ontario and we've sort of amplified them. So we have 12 staff at Legacy. A number of them we have like a logistics coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not on the road trying to book my own appointments. We have a number of staff writers for our commercial and residential stuff. And what these people do a lot of times is data entry. And when I started looking at that, I started looking at the cost to have this.
Right.
And I started looking at the incredible team that we have at Legacy and their education, their background. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this kind of stuff. So what we've done is we've created this SaaS. It's going to be a SaaS product called Lena.
Yeah.
And my elevator pitch is Lena is going to be for appraisers what QuickBooks is to bookkeepers.
Right.
So it's going to be an end-to-end appraisal software. It's going to help with your accounting. It's going to help with booking, your intake, your output. It's going to help with taking some of that human capital out of it and replacing it with automation. It's going to help with your data entry, and it's just going to make the end-to-end appraisal process much more quick and efficient.
Sweet.
And
how far along is this?
It's pretty far. We were awarded the Ignition Fund in 2022.
Hey, congrats.
Thank you. We have a full-time CTO, Mike Huggett, who is slowly picking away at this monumental task. Right now, the phase that we're at is we're looking at trying to implement it into Legacy as a business and really rip it apart, build it back up, rip it apart.
Like make it prove that it's effective for you before you start using it,
then
offering it to other.
The floodgates are open. Like we'll have the full dev team. So I think it'll be ready for our crude internal use by probably March. There's a full interface now. We're incorporating geo mapping into it. I take our CTO out on the road with me at least once a week, if not twice, to test the different aspects of Lena in the field to make sure it works.
So is it on your phone?
It's going to be both. So it'll be web based. So it can be on your phone, tablet, or your computer. And it's going to help with gathering data on site. Like we have an app where you can measure the length of the wall of a house. It'll transfer right onto your tablet into a sketch thing. So you're not having to redraw that. And
then probably as you're taking photos, it goes right into it and it associates with the titles that you put on those.
100%. So all your information goes back to your team, and your team can then start, banging out the report.
On the comps, do all the stuff that you
do. The appraiser needs to do that, but all that, it's easy for someone to pull a geo link, or you pull a geo link and your administrator can see the assessment value. You got to put that on your appraisal report.
Right. Yeah.
It's easy to put the date of the appraisal. It's easy to insert pictures that you took. Putting pictures in an appraisal report is actually one of the most time consuming things for an appraiser. That I didn't go to school for 8 years to do that.
Yeah.
There should be an automated way to do that. And so we're looking for those things. The other really neat part of Lena when it becomes SaaS is the information that it can provide. I'm really looking into sort of the ethics and the legality of maybe hosting some sort of a cloud-based service where we can gather data, keep it private, but pull certain threads of statistics and stuff like that out. So we have real-time data, kind of what we were talking about. Appraisers are always working on, properties real time, but we don't get to see that like you do on an MLS, right?
Right. Yeah.
So is there a way that I can take that data and make it available to the public so we have more up-to-date stats on what's going on?
So I want to dig in more, but my camera's batteries are dying.
Sure, no problem.
I think we lost mine and the wide angle. I think we just have the one on you left now.
Oh God, that's horrible. I feel bad.
No, it's okay.
Don't put this on.
No, it'll be great. Yeah. It'll be great. But I just I feel like we could keep talking for hours and hours, and I would love to keep doing that. For now, what is the best way for people to reach you if they either want to, for consulting services, or maybe there's someone out there who wants to be an appraiser or something, or anything like that, or wants to learn more about Lena? Like, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. So our company is called Legacy Realty. It's just legacy-realty.ca on the web. You can find like all of our emails and stuff there, or Tian at legacy-realty.ca. Send me an email. Our phone number at the office is there. I love chatting real estate with people, and I love, don't feel like you have to call with a project in mind. If you're just curious about renos, if you're curious about the appraisal process, anything, just
Sweet.
Call and pick my brain. That's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Keller, thank you
Cheers.
so much, Tian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sweet.
Cheers, man.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to Chattel Fixtures PEI Real Estate Podcast, coming out every Tuesday morning. I'm your host, David Cyrus McDonald. If you want to reach out to me for any reason, please visit chattelfixtures.com to find my contact information, show notes, and more. Subscribe to Chattel Fixtures on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube to hear more conversations about real estate on PEI. See you next Tuesday.